Disclaimer: efforts have been made to not to infringe with any copyright. If so, it may be brought to our notice for its acknowledgement in future editions. No part of this digital content be reproduced, stored, or distributed in any or by any means either on paper or electronic media unless authorized. Digital content for candidates with speech and hearing disability. Sector: Apparel, Made-ups and Home Furnishing. Subsector: Apparel, Occupation: Embroiderer. Reference ID: PWD AMH Q1001, version 1.0, NSQF level 4. Chapter 3: Embroiderer Decorative Design using a combination of stitches and work styles. Unit 3.4: Common Embroidery Techniques in India. Hello friends, welcome to an exciting session of embroidery techniques. Key learning outcome: identify and understand chikankari motifs and stitches, identify and understand fulkari motifs and stitches, identify and understand zari motifs and stitches. So let's start with chikankari. The word chicken is derived from the Persian word chicken or chikin, which means a kind of embroidered fabric. Chikankari is an ancient form of white oral embroidery, intricately worked with needle and raw thread. It is an understated embroidery, white on white, in which minute and delicate stitches stand out as textural contrast, shadows, and decorations. Common chikankari motifs are paisley. It is also known as keri, raw mango, and is termed differently in different languages. Like in Bengali, kalka, in Tamil, mankolam, or simply mango pattern. In Marathi, koyeri or mango seed. In Hindi, Urdu, keri or mango seed. In Punjabi, ambi or raw mango. Number 2, machli. It comprises of two fishes symbolizing in good luck. Number 3, Hindi Urdu flower. This representation of lyrical stylized flowers and petals is influenced by Ganga, Jamunite Hazib. Belor creepers. These are very common in the Awadh tradition of textiles and are integral part of chicken curry. Number 5, Butta. It is one of the most popular motifs of Mughal art. Consists of a floral spray with stylized leaves and flowers. Geometrical patterns. Geometrical patterns include vertical, horizontal, diagonal, or zigzag patterns and strips. Chicken curry stitches. Chicken curry incorporates different surface ornamentations, techniques, stitches. Embroidery stitches, jalis, darazdari. The stitches in chicken curry are divided mainly into three heads. Flat stitches. These are delicate, subtle, and lie close to the surface of the fabric, giving it a very distinctive textural appearance. Different types of flat stitches are: number 1, type G. This is the simplest chicken stitch and occasionally done within parallel rows to fill petals and leaves in a motif called ghaspati. Number 2, peshni. Type G is sometimes used as a base for working other variations, and peshni is one of them. Number 3, rahet. It is a stem stitch worked with 6 threads on the wrong side of the fabric. It is common in the double form called dora bakhia as an outlining stitch. Number 4, bakhia. It is of two types, ulta bakhia and seedhi bakhia. It is a filling stitch and is often referred to as shadow work. Number 5, hool eyelet stitch. Hool is a fine detached eyelet stitch. It can be worked upon 6 threads and often forms the center of a flower. Number 5, kaj. Similar to the blanket stitch, the stitch is used to seal the edges of the material where it would be cut to save from fraying. Number 6, ghaspati. It is used as a filler stitch in leaves and gives a finished look. Number 7, zanzira. Zanzira is a small chain stitch worked with one thread on the right side of the fabric. Embossed stitches. These stitches are highlighted from the fabric surface, lending it a characteristic grainy texture. Different types of embossed stitches are: Number 1. Muri, French knot. Number 2. Fanda. Types of jalis. Jali is work. Jali work is the most striking feature of chicken embroidery and creates a delicate net effect. The fabric is broken into holes by teasing a wap and V yarns and holding them in position using small stitches. Different types are: Number 1. Madrasi Jali. This is a series of small holes, square in shape, alternating with closed areas. Number 2. Makra. This is similar to the Madras Jali. In this, the holes are filled with diagonal intersecting threads. Number 3. Chataiya Jali. This is a checkered pattern formed with holes and closed areas. Number 4. Bangle Jali. In this jali, the holes are smaller as compared to the Madras jali. The holes are assorted in parallel banks with alternate closed areas. Types of Darazdari. Daraz Kakam is a unique way of assembling two pieces of a garment through seemingly invisible stitches that are concealed. Tiny pieces of fabrics are cut out in different shapes, which are applied either on the surface or between the two surfaces and then outlined with fine stitches. All this used to be done by hand, including the finishing of the edges and joining of the seams. It is visible only when seen against the light. Different motifs were used for joining the seams, such as Phul Daraz and Machli Daraz. Fulkari. Fulkari is the traditional art of making embroidered odhni, which are head drape or stoles used by women in Punjab. The word Fulkari is a combination of two Sanskrit words, ful, flower, and karya, to do. Therefore, Fulkari means to do flower work. Fulkari motifs. Different Fulkari motifs are geometric motifs. Geometrical motifs such as triangles, squares, and vertical and horizontal lines with changing directions, and the dance stitch with various color combinations. The vegetables, fruits, and oral motifs. Vegetable motifs such as karela, bitter gourd, gobi, cauliflower, mirchi, chili, and dhania, coriander, and fruits like santara orange, anar pomegranate, nut pear, both muskmelon, mango slice, wheat or barley stalk, and chuare, dried dates, and some other are used as motifs for a fulkari such as genda, marigold, surajmukhi sunflower, motia jasmine, and kohl lotus flower. The birds and animal motifs. Animal motifs: the cow, buffalo, goat, camel, horse, elephant, snake, fish, tortoise, pig, rabbit, frog, cat, rat, donkey, squirrel, and lion. Birds motifs: the peacock, parrot, sparrow, crow, owl, hen, and pigeon are the most popular. Jewelry motifs. Items like the necklace, kangan, karanful, and jhumka. Different types of earrings, gulband. Different type of bracelets, nose rings, tika, shringar patti, fools, and rani har with a pendant, etc. are common motifs used by women of Punjab. Household articles. Vilana rolling pin, gadawa brass urn, half filled with water, and ghada pitcher, etc. Miscellaneous articles taken from rural life. Shalimar, Charbagh, Chaurasia Bagh depict the Mughal and the other gardens. Fulkari stitches. The basic embroidery stitches used in Fulkari can be categorized into three types depending on their formation. Number 1. Flat stitches. Types of flat stitches. Running stitches. Running stitch or straight stitch is the basic stitch in hand sewing and embroidery, on which all the other forms of sewing are based on. It is used for outlines and curved lines. Step to be followed for its working. Work from right to left. Bring thread up at 1, then down at 2, up at 3 and down at 4 and continue. The spaces between the stitches can be the same length as the stitches or shorter for a different look. Take several stitches on needle before drawing it through. Back stitch. Here individual stitches are made backward to the general direction of swing. It is used for outlines and curved lines. Steps to be followed for its working. Bring needle to right side and repeat. Work from right to left. Bring needle up at 1 and back down at 2. Move and bring needle up at 3, then back down at 1. Continue stitching. Stem stitch. An embroidery stitch derived from back stitch in which each stitch overlaps the previous stitch to one side, forming a twisted line of stitching with the thread passing below the needle. It creates a rope-like appearance. Steps to be followed for its working. Work from left to right. Bring needle up at 1 and down at 2. Bring needle back up halfway between 1 and 2 at 3, just slightly above the first stitch. Be sure to keep thread below the needle. Continue stitching a long line, keeping stitches small and uniform. Split stitch. An embroidery stitch derived from back stitch in which each stitch is formed by splitting through the previous stitch, forming a chain-like formation. Work from left to right. Bring needle up at 1 and down at 2. Bring needle back at 3, splitting the center of the previous stitch. Take needle down at 4 and then back up at 2. Continue stitching. Long and short stitch. Long and short stitch is a variation of satin stitch which is used for fine shading. In the first row of satin stitches, every other stitch is half the length of its neighbors. It is used for filling a shape by working rows closely together. First, work a row of alternating long and short satin stitches. Keep the upper edge of the design line even. Next, work a second row of long even length stitches into a short stitches of first row, passing the needle through the P of the stitch above. Continue stitching rows until the shape is nearly filled, and the last row of long stitches are worked along the bottom of the design line. Stitch the last row with short stitches to fill in the open area along the bottom. Coaching stitch. Coaching technique involves laying of yarn or other materials across the surface of the ground fabric and fastened in place with small stitches of the same or a different yarn. This stitch involves two threads, a thicker foundation thread and a thinner thread called the couching thread. It is used for outlining shapes, straight and curvy lines, spirals, bold dimensional accents, decorative borders. Bring foundation thread onto the front and place along the design line. Bring the couching thread up under the foundation thread and make a tiny stitch over the thread, going back into and very close to the entry hole. Cross stitch. Cross stitch is a popular form of counted thread embroidery in which X-shaped stitches in a lead, raster-like pattern are used to form a picture. Step to be followed for its working. Stitching from left to right, bring needle up at 1, down at 2, then up at 3 and down at 4. Continue stitching across to end of line. Start back stitching from right to left. Make crosses by bringing the needle up at 5 and down at 6. Continue until all crosses have been stitched. Herringbone stitch. A herringbone stitch is a needlework stitch used in embroidery, resembling the bones extending from the spine of a herring fish. Steps to be followed for its working. Work from left to right. Bring needle up at 1 and down at 2. Bring needle up at 3 and down at 4 to create an elongated cross stitch. Bring needle up at 5 and continue. Chevron stitch. Chevron stitch is a line and a filling stitch which you can work on even weave or plain weave fabrics. It makes a decorative border with a zigzag design which is worked from left to right. Steps to be followed for its working. Bring needle up at 1, down at 2. Bring the P of the needle back through the fabric halfway between 1 and 2 at point 3. Bring the needle up to 4 and make a back stitch by bringing your needle up from 5 down at 6. Bring the P of your needle back through the fabric halfway between 5 and 6 at point 7. Bring your needle down at 8 and repeat the stitching sequence. Number 2. Loop stitches. Types of loop stitches. Chain stitch. Let's understand steps to be followed for chain stitching. Chain stitch is a swing and embroidery technique in which a series of looped stitches form a chain-like pattern. Work from top to bottom. Bring needle up at 1 and then reinsert needle in same hole, forming a loop. Bring needle up at 2 and pull thread to tighten loop. One desired shape is achieved. Repeat multiple stitches to create a chain. To end the row, make a small stitch over the last loop to hold it in place to secure thread on backside. Lazy daisy stitch. Detached chain stitch. Lazy daisy is an embroidery stitch formed by elongated loop or a long chain stitch held down at the free end by a small stitch. It stitches in a circle to create flowers, leaves. Steps to be followed for its working. Come up at A and back down in the same hole or right next to point A, forming a loop on the front side. Bring needle up at B and pull thread to shape loop into desired shape. Pulling tighter creates a straightener looking stitch, while a looser thread creates a more rounded loop. Feather stitch. It is made of open, looped stitches worked alternately to the right and left of the central rib. Work vertically from top to bottom. Bring needle up at 1 and back down to right at 2, leaving a loop on the front. Bring the needle back up at 3 and pull thread to shape loop as desired. Insert the needle to the right of 4 and 5, leaving a loop of thread on the front. Bring needle up at 6 and pull thread to shape loop. Take next stitch to the left and continue stitching. To finish, take a small stitch over the last loop. Fly stitch. Fly stitch is also known as Y stitch and open loop stitch. Fly stitch is worked easily since it is made up of V-shaped loop, which is then tied down by a vertical straight stitch. Bring needle up at 1 and down at 2, leaving a loop. Come up at 3 and with the needle over the loop, pull the thread to shape a V. Go down at 4 to anchor the V shape. Buttonhole stitch. Buttonhole or blanket stitch is a looped stitch used to straighten and secure the edge of a material, as around a buttonhole. Buttonhole stitches catch a loop of the thread on the surface of the fabric. Needle is returned to the back of the fabric at the right angle to the original start of the thread. Work from left to right. Bring needle up at 1, down at 2 and up at 3. Keep the thread looped under the needle. Pull thread through and shape stitch as desired. Repeat multiple stitches until completed. Fishbone stitch. Fishbone stitch is a decorative stitch used for filling in patterns such as leaves and petals and making decorative borders. Each stitch is worked from outer edge to the center line. Bring the needle at A and insert to point B. Again bring the needle up at point C and insert at point D, covering the base of the first stitch. Continue the stitches from side to side by overlapping the base of the previous stitch until the design is filled. Number 3. Knotted stitches. Types of knotted stitches. French knot stitch. French knot is a decorative embroidery stitch made by looping the thread 2 or more times around the needle, which is then inserted into the fabric. It is used for decorative dots, filled out flower centers, leaves, plants, etc. Bring needle up at 1. Hold thread taut with other hand and wrap the thread twice around end of the needle. Gently pull the thread so that the wrapped threads tighten, and while holding it taut, insert the needle next to one. Pull thread through onto the back side until the knot is formed and lies securely on the surface. Bullion knot stitch. Bullion is a decorative stitch in embroidery made by winding the thread several times around the needle before sewing a backstitch. Steps to be followed for its working. Make a backstitch the length of the bullion knot required. Bring the needle out at one, but do not bring it out all the way. Twist the thread around the needle point as many times as is necessary to equal the length of the back stitch. Holding the left thumb on the coiled thread, turn the needle back to one and insert it in the same place. Pull the thread through until the bullion knot lies at. Colonial knots. Colonial knots are a kind of surface knots used in embroidery made by wrapping the thread around the needle with the tail of the thread towards the eye of the needle. This is opposite of the French knot. Bring the needle up through fabric and wrap the thread up, over and behind the needle, forming a figure 8 around the needle. Insert the tip of the needle back through the fabric, close to where it first came up, but not in the same hole. Pull the thread carefully until a knot is formed. Then push the needle to the back and pull the thread through. Coral stitch. Coral stitch is an old embroidery stitch which creates a line that looks like a row of knots and is used for outlines and follows a curved detail well. Used for decorative borders, foliage, plant stem. Let's understand its working. Working from right to left, hold the working thread to the left of the starting point or the last stitch. Insert the needle into the fabric above the working thread and bring the P of the needle out just under the thread. Wrap the thread around the needle from left to right and pull the needle through the resulting loop. Zari. In zari work, lustrous metallic wire, traditionally silver wire coated or plated with gold, along with silk threads, beads, beetle wings, precious stones, etc., were used for embroidery, unlike other embroideries where floss silk, cotton, wool yarns were used. Zari design and motifs. Number 1. Kamdani. This is a light needle work done on light material like scarves, veils, and caps using flattened wire. Ordinary thread is used and the wire is pressed down with the stitching producing a satin stitch effect that is glittering and is called Hazara Butti, thousand lights. Number 2. Gijia, Karchobi. It is a form of raised zari metallic thread embroidery created by sewing at stitches on cotton padding. The technique is commonly used for bridal and formal costumes as well as for velvet coverings, tent hangings, curtains, and the coverings of animal carts and temple carryouts, etc. Number 3. Kasab, Tikki, Karchobi. It is done by using gold or silver threads and spangles, sitara. The stitches used in this embroidery are running and chain with which outline is created and filled with the sequence tikki. It gives a shimmer look and is also very light in weight. Number 4. Zig Chalak, Karchobi. It is a combination of coiled wire, zig and zigzag wire, chalak which is tugged, from one point to the other to form a three-dimension motif on padded cotton stuff. Number 5. Bharat Karachi, Karchobi. Using pieces of cardboard to provide a raised body for the design, the material being used as padding on fabric when embroidery is in progress. The image shows a padded motif of a peacock raised by inserted foam and stitched over by thread. Number 6. Zig Tikki, Karchobi. Uses twisted coil, wire, zig and spangle tikki. It is done through a combination of zigzag coiled wire and sequence tikki grounded onto the silk velvet. Number 7. Zardozi. This is a heavy and more elaborate embroidery work which uses varieties of gold coiled wire like dabka, salma sitara, gijai, padla, katori, kora, chikna, spangles, beads, seed pearls, and gota. Number 8. Katoki bale. This is a border pattern made on stiff ground fabric, and the whole surface is filled with sequin, edging and dabka, kasab and sitara. A variation of this border technique is lace made on net and filled with zar stitches and spangles. Number 9. Mukesh. This is one of the oldest styles and is done with silver wire or badla. The wire itself serves as a needle, piercing the material to complete the stitches. Number 10. Tilla or Marori work. This is the kind of embroidery where gold thread tilla is stitched onto the surface with a needle using the thin zari or silk threads, leaving no space between the threads. Number 11. Gota work. In this, gota is cut into shapes such as the gamla, flower pot, kairi mango and champak flower. And appliqued onto a base fabric embellished with embroidery techniques such as zari and ari, gotapati. It involves folding of tapes into basic rhomboid units referred to as pa or leaves and combining them to create elaborate motifs and patterns that are sewn onto garments. Number 12. Kinnari work. A small variation is kinnari work where the embellishments are done onto at edges in the form of tassels with a combination of beads, silk yarns and studded pearls. Zari stitches. The zari embroidery stitches can be categorized into two types depending upon usage of normal needle and hooked needle. Number 1. Flat stitches. Types of flat stitches: laid coaching, couching technique involves laying of yarn or other materials across the surface of the ground fabric. This stitch involves two threads, a thicker foundation thread and the thinner thread called the couching thread. Satin. A satin stitch or damask stitch is a series of add stitches that are used to completely cover a sek on the background fabric. Number 2. Loop stitches. Steps involved: take a thread with one end knotted and make a loop under the fabric to be hooked in the needle's end. After being hooked in the needle's end, pull the needle upward. Pull the needle upward to make a loop and hold the thread gently underneath. Rotate the needle in opposite direction to move forward. Move forward to insert the needle in the another spot. Hold the threads gently underneath. Insert the needle and hold the threads gently to make a loop around the needle. Hook the threads into the needle's end. After the thread is hooked, rotate the needle into the opposite direction and move the needle upward. After moving forward and repeating the same step at another spot, getting the chain stitch, hold the thread gently underneath. Thank you.